On this slide, I'm going to tell you about some screen layout best practices. Obviously, these only apply to web design. The most important is to use responsive design. That refers to the way that the objects and text on the screen dynamically adjust to the screen size that it's displayed on. Objects can move around, resize, and even disappear according to the responsive design algorithms. Until fairly recently, responsive design was pretty tricky to implement. Now it's automated to a pretty high degree in most web authoring software. So the best practices for this are: use fluid layouts that adapt to the pixel dimensions and screen size of the device that it's displayed on. The responsive design features of your graphics software should account for differences in browser settings and custom style sheets that may be on the user's device. These settings and style sheets may conflict with responsive features of your website or web page. For instance, the user may have set text to appear larger, especially if they're visually impaired. Here are some examples of software that implements responsive design. You generally have about 5 seconds after a user opens a web page to capture their attention. After 5 seconds, they may be off to another page or site. To bring attention to the most important content, you need to place key information above the fold to capture the user's attention immediately. The term above the fold is an old term used in the newspaper industry, where you try to motivate your audience to buy the newspaper by putting the most important headlines on the top half of the front page. In other words, the part that was visible when it was folded. It's the same in the web page design world. Always have the most important info appear to the user as part of the home page that is visible when the page first opens. On a standard resolution 1920 by 1080 screen, this would be 1920 by 900 worth of space. An illustration will show you the concept of content coverage in action. Here's an example of the ideal proportions to use for content versus navigation in a web page. This happens to be from an online learning module, but the principle is the same. The moral of the story is that content should account for at least half, ideally 80% of a page's total non-white space area. That leaves 20% for the interface or navigation. Some browser considerations for screen layout are the following. Design with Browser Chrome in mind to ensure a consistent user experience and to avoid resizing content to fit inside the browser. We talked about Browser Chrome earlier. It's the space taken up by the browser window and interface elements. As we described earlier, the user may have made custom settings in their browser determining things like default text size. You need to consider how this may impact your design. As you saw in the illustration a minute ago, the navigation elements at the top and bottom of the web page should ideally be about 20% of the screen. Minimize screen clutter by doing the following. Regularly review your design elements and remove anything that does not add value to user interactions or aesthetics. The best way to do this is to remove design elements one at a time, and if the design works just as well without a certain element, kill it. Use white space effectively to create a clean and organized appearance, as was shown in the previous illustration. Do not force horizontal scrolling. It violates usability. This illustration shows what happens if the page you designed isn't designed with responsive design principles. In other words, that it does not resize horizontally to avoid horizontal scrolling. Vertical scrolling in many cases cannot be avoided, although you should consider putting the content that users would have had to scroll to see into a separate linked page.